Well, I have about 10 minutes to give you the best sermon I can give you, so I'm going to do that. This morning's title is Depending on God. I have a question for you to start us off this morning, but how many in here hate to fly? Anybody here hate to fly? A few hands. How many of you love to fly? Anybody love to fly? All right, good. I enjoy flying. I know that there are some of you who are terrified. I've sat next to one of them, which would be my wife, who grabs my arm the entire time. And even, Austin Kelly hates to fly. I got to mention that just because we flew to Honduras one time and he was so nervous. But there are a lot of people who hate to fly that don't enjoy getting on planes. But did you guys see the story that came out Wednesday about a man who was in a plane and his pilot all of a sudden became incoherent? Like all of a sudden he was unconscious. Did you guys see that story? I can't even imagine. I think about it and go, oh my goodness. And it was him, the pilot and him. That was all that was on the plane. The man had never flown before. And so I look at this situation and go, oh my goodness, what would I do? Now I hate flying, right? Anybody change their mind after that story? No, you think about situations like that, and sometimes we're handed situations like that in life that are so scary. We have no idea what to do. But this gentleman, if you listen to the over the radio, he is so calm the entire time. Some of us have that ability, some of us don't. But he gets up, he levels the plane back out because it was in a nosedive. I don't know how you get to the front of the. I guess you get to the front of the plane pretty quickly. I don't know. But he leveled the plane out. The headset wasn't plugged in. He figured out how to plug it in. The man had never touched an airplane before, did not know how to fly. He ended up contacting them over the radio and got guidance from a man who taught people how to fly. They pulled up the schematics and walked him through it, and all of a sudden he went off the radar, they said, and 10 seconds later he had landed the plane and everything was okay. Can you imagine that type of situation? I am so thankful sometimes to have somebody like that in my life that I can connect to and go, help me, I need help, right? Somebody who's been through the experience, somebody who's experienced life and knows what to do in that kind of situation. But I think about how important it is for us to always depend on God, because we have somebody in our life that we can always depend on, who knows exactly what we need, knows exactly what we should be doing, and knows exactly how to get us through the situations that are difficult, like flying an airplane. And so I think about our own personal lives, and I think about how important it is, graduates, as you start to become independent and step out on your own, and start to step out of your homes and make decisions for your own personal lives, that you continually depend on God. Somebody a while back, and I mentioned this last night, but I had a person in my life who was talking to me one day, and they were pointing out the difference that all of a sudden in life sometimes that we, with our parents, we always want to raise our kids, right, to where they're independent, to where they can live on their own, and through this process to where we can let them go out into the world, and we know that they will be safe, we know that they will be strong enough to handle and make good, wise choices. And we raise our kids from the beginning of life to the point where when we send them out that they're ready to go. But I think about our own personal lives with God. Our own personal lives with God are completely the opposite of that. God says, as you start this relationship with me, I want you to become more dependent upon me. I want you to place more things in my hands. I want you to know that I am somebody that you can depend on each and every day, each step of your life. So place more things in my hands. As you grow closer to me, trust me more. Know that you can hand me these things. Know that you can give me these things. And so the one thing that I want to encourage you, graduates, as you step out of your houses and as you step out into life and you become more independent, remember that there's somebody that you're supposed to be becoming more dependent upon through these transitions. As you become more responsible over things, it becomes so much more difficult in life, doesn't it? And wouldn't it be great to have somebody that you can place all these things in their hands? You have somebody. You have somebody greater than any person on this earth. You have God, the author and creator of the universe. This morning I want to read to you a parable. I don't have much time, so I'm going to read this really quickly, give you just a few jots, and then we'll be finished. But it comes from Luke chapter 15. I love this story because it's a story that Jesus tells about a father and a son, and how great the father's love is for that son. And this story is told so that we can comprehend how great the love of the Father is for each and every single one of us. And so I want you to listen to this story for just a second. It's a familiar story. It's one that you've heard probably several times in my Bible class and in the auditorium. But I want you to listen to it again because I think it's worth listening to. So here it is. Luke chapter 15, verse 11 says this. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate." What a wonderful story, comparing what it looks like to see a father loving his son, and that's exactly how our Father loves each and every single one of us. This story is told, if you go back to verse 1, because some men are muttering, it says, that's what my translation says, underneath their breath, they're saying, "Why does he eat with these people, these sinners, these tax collectors?" And so Jesus tells this parable. He tells the one of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son here. And he makes the point through all of this of how much your Father loves you. You know that? Graduates, do you know that? God loves you. He wants a relationship with you. He wants you to be dependent upon Him. But as we look at this story, we see a young man who doesn't want to be dependent upon his father. Right? He wants to go and make his own life. He wants to do his own things, wants to make his own path forward. So he asks boldly, because this is not something that should just be handed to him. This is not, even in today's time, we would not give our inheritance to our kids before we've passed away if they came and asked us, right? But this father loves his child so much that he allows him to go and do whatever he wants to do. You go and you do whatever you want to do. You make your choice because it's your life to live. And I think about how wonderful that is, that we have a God that allows us to choose what we want to do. He doesn't force you to be in a relationship with you. He doesn't require it of you. But He says, you get to do what you want to do. You make your choices. Because what kind of relationship would it be if you had no choice in choosing the Father? You would only be a slave, wouldn't you? But in this situation, you get to be a son and you get to be a child of God. And so the son goes out and lives the life that he wants to live. Goes out and parties and does every worldly thing that you can imagine. But eventually it catches up with him, doesn't it? There's a famine and everything is gone. He has no money left. So he hires himself out. And if you think about the story, he gets hired to go and feed pigs. This is no job that any Jew would ever want. And the people that he's speaking to are people that would go, oh my goodness. He's at that point that he has to go and get a job of feeding pigs. And he not only longs to just be able to eat, but he longs to eat the food that the pigs are eating. And the food that the pigs are eating are not food that he can even eat. It's not even the food that they can eat, because the pods are pods that you can't even digest them. But eventually he comes to his senses. Maybe you've been at this point in your life before where you come to your senses and go, there has got to be something better than this. I remember what it used to be like living under God's rule, living according to the things that God desired for me. That's so much better, isn't it? Me personally, my junior year of high school, I totally stopped following God. I left everything. And it wasn't that I didn't believe in Him. I'd become very upset just with my own situation in life. And I remember just going out and living a worldly lifestyle. And it was at that time in my life that it didn't take long for me, thankfully. But I remember coming to my senses and going, there's something better than this. There's something better than this. I remember looking at God's people and looking at God and looking at what Jesus does for each and every one of us. And I came to the conclusion, man, I would rather be in the house of God than I would to be in the world, because the world has nothing to offer me. Graduates, I want to encourage you to think about that. This world doesn't have anything to offer for you that's better than what God has to offer you. Living in His house, under His guidance and under His direction, is way better than living according to the ways of this world. I look at this, and as the story goes, the son decides to go home. And you look at his attitude. It's one of humility, isn't it? He's ready to come back home, not as a son, but as a servant. I would rather be in my Father's house as a servant than I would be out here in the world. And so he goes home humbled, his head ducked, and says to his father, just let me back in. The father sees him coming before he ever even gets there and goes running to him. What's he have? He gets one of his best robes. He gets a ring. He gets sandals for his feet. And they kill the fattened calf and they celebrate. The father has been there waiting on that child to return, waiting for him to come back home and to live the life and to be in his house as his son. He doesn't allow him to come back as a servant, but he restores him. He restores him as his son. You look at the long robe. A long robe is not meant for a slave or a servant, but it's meant for royalty. You look at the ring, and it shows ownership, it shows sonship, and shows that he is a part of that house. And so he's restored not as a servant, but as a son. How thankful we should be that we have a God who sent His Son to this earth to die for each and every single one of us. There's another part of this story that goes on. You see the other brother, and he takes for granted what his father has given to him also, I believe. Because you can see a connection back in verse 1 between the Pharisees and the scribes and the attitude that's there, that they have, and the attitude that this older brother has. And I think about how important it is for us to realize what we've been given. We've been given forgiveness. And to live in the Father's house, it's not something that we deserve. To be able to come to worship each and every Sunday, isn't that a blessing? To be able to sit at His feet, to sit with His people, to be able to sing praises to Him, and to know that He has given us this life. So this morning, I want to give you 3 things, graduates and congregation. Here's my 3 things. Depend on God. Depend on His knowledge. He knows what's best for you. Don't be like the younger brother who demands for his inheritance early and goes and lives a wild lifestyle. But depend on Him. Depend on God's love. God's love is always there for you. He wants a relationship with you. He's waiting for you to be there with Him if you're not. So depend on His love. And then last but not least, depend on His plan. Extend His grace to others that are around you. Don't be like the older brother who takes for granted the grace and the love that he's been given. But extend that same grace to others. Let other people see what God has done in your life and be blessed by that. This morning, I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. I'm thankful for the time that we've had together to honor the accomplishments that each of you have made. I think what a blessing it is that God allows each and every one of us to get up. Here recently, I couldn't even get out of bed the other 3 weeks ago. I couldn't even stand on my feet. I had 2 herniated discs, and trying to stand up was so painful. It makes you a little bit more thankful once you get back to your feet. And I know some of you know that better than I do. But just the fact that we have each and every day to live, to honor, and to glorify Him, what a blessing. Graduates, as you leave here and as you go and do different things in this world, all I want to do is encourage you. Honor God with your life. It's short. We don't have much of a life. It's not long. James says it's but a mist. We live on this earth in light of eternity, because one day we will be with God in heaven and we will live with Him forever, and it will be the greatest blessing we've ever had. This morning, if you need anything, we want to offer the invitation. If you have anything that you need, prayers or anything, you can come now as we stand and sing.